You might have heard the term winning environments. Maybe it's a term you've heard at work or in a sports team. The idea being that things happen around you or happen around the team so that the team works together for greater success. I've been interested for years about how the winning mentality in sport can be translated into business, but I'm also interested in how we can take success in the commercial world into our workouts and also into sport. So I thought it'd be really helpful to find out about winning environments from an expert who's worked in a number of different fields of sport so that we can set up our environments for greater success. In this series, we explore health and wellness under the premise that some illnesses and diseases may be avoidable. Each week, I interview wellness experts and dive deep into an aspect of health and wellness with the aim of giving you greater understanding so you're free to make the best choices about your health based on your individual uniqueness. If you want to explore your health and wellness, please subscribe and hit the bell to get notified of all of our latest uploads as soon as they happen. And if this channel can help your friends or family, please also share it with them too. This week, we're diving deep into winning environments. And as our guest, sports and confidence coach Mark Layder calls it, Winvironment. So Mark, let's start off with looking at what a winning environment it actually is.
It's a focus on excellence and winning edges and doing things different, better, outside the box, all of those kind of things. But it's really an environmental focus on the more we could create the environment as a place for everybody to contribute. There seemed to be a direct correlation, to be a bit jargonistic about it, with improving results.
Fantastic. So other than winning, what would be the other benefits that you would see in a win environment?
Well, I think that question, Neil, sort of it raises the whole point about what winning is. And in a sports game, winning's very clear, isn't it? You know, you've got more than the other in the scoring system. And in business, you know, it's sales or it's compliance or whatever the way you're measured. But I think in Winvironment terms, and one of the phrases that we use not just in sports, but with other people too, but because in sports, there's nearly always a very big scoreboard there that says who is winning the competition, whatever it is. But the more we got into asking, certainly the players of various sports, how many times have they been in a game where they were the better team, but the scoreboard didn't say that because they lost the game? And it opened up the whole sort of different view of they'd been in games where they were the best team and lost. They'd also clearly been in games where they weren't the best team, quote, but won. Yeah. And it changed then that sometimes the scoreboard, it's the finality at the end of the month sales figures or the end of the 95 minutes of a football game or 5 sets of a tennis match. But you may not learn that much from just the score. And that's where, and you start to see it, it wasn't a regular line, but you do hear it more now today. We either win or we learn. And that there's certainly almost again a mantra that says the smartest teams, even the top teams, will lose games. And it's often those that learn the best are the ones that are more likely to be the most productive going forward because, you know, unlike our assumption that the strongest wins or human beings particularly aren't the strongest, the cleverest, but we are the most adaptable, and it's that adaptability that becomes your environment in line with your culture and all of those kind of things that seem to correlate with the increased results.
So from what you're saying, if I'm hearing this right, the environment, one of the key things that we'll see within it, and one of the benefits is that consistent learning and adapting.
Yeah. If you to make it very simple, I mean, Mourinho isn't necessarily the number one coach today, and you know, in football terms, soccer terms as well, that the people think he's been surpassed, but he's clearly got a record that you would pay attention to, and he's also a clever man. And it's one of his lines on his first book, isn't it? That bring me players that want to learn. Doesn't matter whether they're at the Ronaldo level,
Yeah.
or whether they're at, a lower level, that you never stop learning. And if you go to that Ronaldo level, I think famously recently, one of my favorite articles was, they all got back from when he was still at Real Madrid at 3 a.m, traveling across Spain. And he was the only player who got off a 4-hour coach trip back from wherever and got in the ice baths. Everybody else just went home. Well, he's the one that's expected to play till he's 40, and he's done okay so far, and his body is in good, because he will do those extra little things that he has worked out or been advised, give him those winning edges that gives him that relentless push for excellence, and it's that makes him into the continual winner. Now, the moment anybody or any level gets their version of that, their performance level again increases.
That's really interesting. Doing the winning things is learning what it is. I guess the term gives you the edge, and then repeatedly doing that to keep the edge. That's really interesting what you said there about Ronaldo. How do we create a winning environment then at home and at work? Let's say someone's got a personal goal that they want to achieve. How would they create that for themselves? How could the environment support them?
Because you mentioned that you might ask that question, and it was funny about goals, because if you ask 100 people, or there is the famous example of part of some of the stuff that we use, the old Yale story or whatever about how many people have got goals, and they pretty much all raised their hands. But then when they said how many have got written down goals, then it was 3% was the answer to that. And then they tracked them a bit like that 7-Up program that we have in the UK, where they stayed in touch with them. And over many years, the ones that they were able to keep in touch with, the ones that had the written down goals, and this is one of the winning edge steps, if you just write them down, in the sense of at least you can track them, you can review them, which we might come back to. And it was that being able to set a goal and write it down, almost that the brain went, oh, you're serious about this one, is one of the things that seems to correlate with performance. But ultimately what we found with goals was the first question that we started to ask was, whose goal is it? Because on something as simple and mundane as, I don't know, weight loss, and I think it was, plenty of men look at weight loss too, but historically it was a more female orientated area over 30 odd years. And there were some groups of women, and the amount of them that used to say, well, I want to get into this dress size 4 sizes smaller than me because my husband wants me to. So it's his goal, not your goal. So almost the first place is to make sure it's yours. And then there's the technique side, like write it down, and there can be ways of writing it down in better forms. But I think the principles are the key pieces. But again, it was making sure it belongs to you, because then lots of people are working on goals that they're not really that bothered about. And so unsurprisingly, they often don't achieve them. They don't, because there's no kind of juice in it. So I think that's become the major thing. And again, with some of the players over the years, they were often working on goals that when we asked them the question, they went, oh, I'd never thought about that. It's not really, I'm not interested in the number of goals I score. I'm interested in whatever their thing was. So to bring it back to that person and to really personalize it, and then connect them up, if there's obviously in a team more than one person, to how they help the bigger objective, the team or the departmental objective, then you got to connect. Something then happened that everybody could have different goals, but they were all working on a greater good that they were all opted into.
Fascinating, actually, thinking about the goal. I think I mentioned in one of our previous videos that one time I'd written my goals down, and then you kind of like, you look at them and you evaluate them and go, actually, I didn't achieve that goal because actually I didn't really care about it, actually, if I'm honest, when I first wrote it down. So it's like, well, where did the goal come from then in the first place? Why was it important? So it's fascinating. I've got to ask you, Mark, is that an Everton logo that you've got on your...
No, this is not one of my bloodline ones. This one's a Bristol City one for the stuff that I did, because I've worked with them various times, haven't I?
I wasn't sure if it was Everton, whether it was Man City, whether it was Bristol City.
It wouldn't have this colour on if it was Everton. Even as an away colour, they'll never wear that colour.
Yeah, well, you turning up in blue. I know you're an Everton fan, and I came in red today, so we're nearly there, aren't we?
I've got so many of these things over the years. I just thought, well, we're talking a bit of sporty stuff, so I hardly ever wear them, and there's an excuse to wear one of them. So what the heck?
Brilliant, because in the past you've of course worked with Bristol City. So what do you think? And just quickly talking about Bristol City, what would you say would be one of the main things that you were able to do with Bristol City as a club?
The first time we worked with them, they were a big potential club, and they had a relatively new owner that had aspirations and this, that, and the other. But they were in an absolute mess. They were bottom of division, as is one now, so the third tier, and they were going through a terrible time, really terrible time. And they just obviously sacked the manager, and the manager I worked with went in, and he went on a 9-game losing streak, just to really, but even as the new manager, that's a twitch. But during that time, nearly always, when we look back again, what we were putting in was principles, things like, our players, if they throw a ball, in a football move, and nobody shows for the ball, as they call it, you'll see other teams start almost like berating each other. And, well, with a good Liverpool mother, we were taught, you don't air your dirty clothes in public, dirty washing in public. You do that at half time or after the game in review. So they started to be little behavioural things that the football players would call that digging each other out, which is a whole funny language that they have. But it's that disrespect. But fans see that kind of behaviour. So we would say, if somebody's not doing what you think they should, but you've got to address that in a closed confines where you can have the conversation safely and properly. So with a club like Bristol that was a sleeping giant and is now really starting to get close to the Premiership, it was all about putting that cultural base, Winvironment, which we didn't call it in those days, 2008, 9, 10, when they got 2 promotions quite quickly together. So it's that piece again about recognising that there was different groups of players in the changing room that they didn't dislike each other. They just liked their little group more and stuff, and they played different music. And so we started doing things like changing the positions on the team bus to away games, and having things like, typically the more senior players room together. Well, we would do it as a little lottery to draw who you were. And some of the, groups of guys in that situation, there'd be a humour and a banter, as they love to call it, in that situation. But all that was doing really was creating more lines of communication and more understanding. And the younger players in particular, who had often been behind the goal watching those heroes as little youth players, now they're in the same changing room or the same bus. Well, we hadn't got time as a youth player coming in. They had to hit the ground running. So again, the more we could do from the older players to have them recognise that, and the younger players to step up by opening the channels of communication, I would probably simplify it down to, that's what we worked on first. And then you could work on what could we achieve in this next batch of games, and little mini goals, and a bit more of the technique-y end that comes out of that initial communication, everybody else feeling they're involved. And that builds a solid foundation that one of the other clubs, Yeovil, when they were doing well years ago, but they were having a relegation season, and I went back in to help them. And a very experienced player that they brought in to help them, he they can be, they're male, old school males to a degree, and they can be physical. And he famously said he had never been at a club that was in the relegation zone, never with such a good atmosphere, given that he'd been at clubs that were on the verge of promotion and was not like the atmosphere we created. And that's the biggest thing we've had over the years, that players that we've worked with said they came on loan and then went to other clubs, and they would come back and say, Mark, I can't do this anymore at this, because they've now seen a different type of atmosphere. And that's a big form of the Winvironment. It's the way we talk to each other. We don't disrespect each other. We do talk each other up, and all those little pieces of the system, if you like, are presented within a wider communication base of let's talk each other up, let's go do this.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I'm just thinking as you're talking about, I can just imagine, you know, a player going to take a throw in, and you know, players grouping around, and then the angst maybe amongst the group feeds through to the fans. The fans pick it up. Then there's
Absolutely.
instead of cheering, they're now jeering. And I can imagine actually even in workplaces or in homes and things like that, you know, as we're looking to achieve things, if we don't have that understanding around us of what we're looking to achieve and how we're looking to go about it, it's hard for other people to support that. So let's say someone has, someone watching now the video has a sports team or a club, and they want to take that group to the next level. What would be 2 or 3 things that they should immediately do?
Well, that one for me is kind of the original story that started a lot of this, and it just gets people's minds on a track, and it gets them very simple things to do. And it comes from true story of a horse called Ahmed years ago, and I think it was in the States, and it's out there. You can check, you know, it's on the web today. From one of the guys that tells the story. And somewhere there's a statistician that is filming the times of these horses and stuff. And Ahmed, in those days, he won over $1 million. I think he won $1.5 million or whatever that particular season. But this statistician happens to notice that there's another horse that runs in all of the same races that Ahmed does. Ahmed goes on to win $1.5 million, whatever it was, and the other horse won $75,000. So I think the stats were something like 15 times more, but being a statistician, he also worked out the times. Ahmed was only 3% faster than the horse that got the 75,000. Of course, nobody knows that horse's name. So 15 times more winnings to get versus, you know, 3% to get 15 times more money. So that's what opens the winning edge list that we then use with the players. And the winning edge list is symbolic. And it's also a little book that they can, you know, like a little journal they can start to keep in terms of, do they always want to be the last one into training, or should they start coming in a bit earlier? And what were should they do some practicing? And it's, I think it was an old Daley Thompson, I'm aging myself here, but when he was the decathlon #1 and arguably the best athlete across a range in the world, he used to train twice on Christmas Day because he trained 3 times normally any other day, because he figured some of his competitors might train twice, and did. But the Christmas Day one, he said, I figure some of them train once on Christmas Day. I'm gonna train twice. Yes. And he said it let him walk around when he was with the other competitors, almost like, I bet you didn't train twice on Christmas Day. And it just became a reference to him that he knew he had the edge. He knew he was ready. So players and people they develop their own little things like that, and you introduce players to different, and they'll go and turn them into little groups, work on them, but that's the first one. Open the winning edge list as a symbol of little steps you can make today. And whether that's a team of, you know, guys, we used to work with grassroots coaches up in Newcastle, and the little guys that they were working with, mixed teams, girls and guys and stuff, they loved that stuff. And they had the little book, and I did this one, and I worked on it, because it's a real simple thing. So I think that starts the whole process, the Ahmed story. So the list, that's the first one. And probably the second one is something that we've talked about before, and it's the one across investment banks, to network marketing companies, to football clubs, and everything in between over the years that we just happen to have worked with. There's only one thing we've ever kind of, once we understood it, recommended in every program, and that is, if you can't spend, if you're a kind of a boss person, or, you know, somebody that is with a team or with whatever, if you can't spend, which is really invest, some one-to-one time with each of your team members, and it hasn't got to be 2 hours, it might be 10 or 15 minutes, to do a short review, which is 4 questions, which if people want to come back to you and we'll send them the 4 questions, a little booklet with them in, which is just a simple principle of reviewing performance every month. We would encourage players to do it at the end of every game, win, lose or draw, because it creates the habit of, when I first started working with the footballers, I really couldn't understand how they didn't turn up at training on a Monday with their own plan of what they wanted to work on. They were just going to be told by the gaffer to do this, So, well, wait a minute, but you said you wanted to score more goals or whatever it is, then chances are you've got to be practicing on where you get the final ball or whether you shoot early. Or they didn't have anything like that gave them their own focus at the end of the week or after a game to go, yeah, did that. They might not have won, but if that practice becomes part of what they did, then suddenly when we weren't looking, guess what? We weren't 15th anymore. Yeah. We were 7th in the league. And that overall knock-on effect. So they'd probably be the two. It's the 3% winning edge list, that little things I can do today that get better, help me get better. And the second one is review performance. And there's 4 questions. If people want a copy of it, I'll happily send that to them.
We'll add a link in the description below, Mark. Mark, I'd love to ask everyone who I'm interviewing for a little challenge. So this is something that we can take away and do. It could be something we do for a day, it could be something we do for a week or longer. But invitation for you to set the challenge, not just for me to do it, but for our community as a whole. So what would your challenge be?
Yeah, that one that we were talking about beforehand, weren't we, a little bit, and that is the review thing. That if you study whatever people watching this class of successful people, they may not be they may not be academically brilliant or any of those things that we think are the correlators of success, but whatever they're good at, they get better and they learn from and keep pushing on that level. And it's almost that relentless push for excellence or being better. And the quickest way we know to do that is the little 4 questions. What went well last month? And I'll come back to that one quickly in a minute. What were the lessons is that second question. What would I do differently? And the third one is, what help do I need? It's a classic one historically for men in particular, because I'll do it. Yeah, well, you know what? Often other people can help you do things a lot quicker than you can struggling on your own. And then the fourth one is, on the back of those, what's a short-term goal that comes from if these things fit together? The what went well question, by the way, is very important, because most of us can remember the school books, and it was kind of the tick, or in the States they call them the check mark, in red pens. Yeah. And they used to be half the size of the cross when you got your 3 out of 10. Somehow the X's were like this big, the ticks were like this big. And we've done work with schools where we got rid of that and just turned them into pencil with just the ticks, and got the kids to work together on the ones that they didn't get a score for. And guess what? They work them out together, then they could put the tick or the check mark in, and then they could write the 10. We'd taken out the 10 out of 10, the kids put it back, and they started to all, irrelevant of natural ability levels at that time, 10 out of 10, 10 out of 10, 10 out of 10, the teachers told us their handwriting was better, their behavior was better, they were nicer to each other. All we'd done, it wasn't the plan, by the way, was change the scoring system, but the reality of it is in that focus on the 3 out of 10 or the 7 out of 10 that you got right, before you try and answer the missing bit, the 7 out of 10, why didn't you get 10? The real answer is, but if I'd known how to, I would have done. If I knew the answer, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So it's just a nice way, because we are programmed. That whole looking stupid or being wrong type feel of things. So we acknowledge that, and that's why at least go back to anything that worked first and then apply it to the missing 3 out of 10 or whatever the score on the doors is. So that would be the challenge. Review what you did every, let's say, month, so it's not too onerous. If you can do it one-to-one, but the challenge to other people with team members is to do it with the team individually. What went well? What would I do differently, or what are the lessons? And particularly the who can help me more than ever today, that feeling of collaboration and other people with other skills, and then a short-term goal. The challenge would be, if you do that for 6 months, you'll never stop it.
Well, there's actually just so much that I got from listening to Mark. I made so many notes here while we were talking. I was fascinated to think about the goal setting thing, and obviously writing it down is something that's been said for quite a long time, but the consideration of whose goal is it was an interesting one. And also the little steps. I think it's when you're moving towards something, I think it's always good to kind of lean into things and take small steps towards it just to get some momentum. One thing I really liked though was the review, because I think without actually, if you set a goal but you don't actually review where you're at, then it's almost pointless maybe setting the goal in the first place. So it's always good to take a review. So I'm up for that challenge that Mark's laid down, and using his structure. I know he's going to give us a download, and I'll put the information below for you. Are you going to take the challenge that Mark has left us with? If you are, please do tell us in the comments below that you're going to do that, and also come back and tell us how you've got on with that. And also look out for my challenge video in the next couple of weeks, where I round up all of the challenges that all of our experts have given us over the last few weeks, and just try out the things that they've given us to do. And you'll be able to see my findings from that in my challenge roundup video in a couple of weeks' time. To get that video and all of our latest health and wellness uploads, including interviews and reviews, please subscribe and hit the bell to get notified whenever we post. And if this channel can help your friends and family, please do share it with them too. Also, if you want to get proactive with your health and wellness, then Total Wellness Club are developing health quests for you over at questly.life. Join while we're developing the site, and you'll get instant access to health quests that immediately personalise your health. You'll get to identify which of 10 critical health categories need your attention. You'll be able to track your progress, and you'll be able to help us develop the platform as we go. I'll put a link in the description below so that you can get to Questly, and I'll see you next week.